Alright, hi, today I'm going to be showing you how to use our background building stencils and our background building coordinating stamps along with the Chubby Unicorn stamp set so that we can create this really fun card. It says here I'm going to add some unicorn to your day, and when you open it up you've got this bright, beautiful sun, rainbow, unicorn, and you can see we use the Cloud Stencil here, we use the Hill Stencil and the stamps to add that little bit of detail, and then of course our rainbow background builder and our sun background builder, and of course the star of the card, Purdie the unicorn, right there. So I'm going to show you how these elements work together. So let's get started. I cut my white cardstock a little bit bigger because when we're done you're going to trim off the excess, so leave room for that. So my hill stencil here has a solid hill and then one with texture grass, and then it also has an element up here for little grass elements you can add to it. So I suggest move your stencil around and decide where you want your hills to go. I really want my hills to overlap, so I'm going to be thinking of that when I place my mask. So to mask it out, I'm going to be using my Post-it tape and a C1 Copic marker. And I'm just going to trace the hill onto my Post-it tape, really simple, cut it out, then you have two masks. And I suggest keeping these on the back of your stencil, and that way you have them always, you don't have to keep cutting them out. So I know I want mine to overlap, but the reason why I have them higher up is because, remember, we're going to trim that out. So just imagine the scene being a bit smaller and allow for that. I want my hills overlapping because Purdie the unicorn is going to sit right up there on top and be the star, so I want her a little bit forward. And this top portion is going to be our clouds. So let's go ahead and get our stencil and get started. The layered stencil has two components. One is a base and the other is the detail, and I'll be showing you how we're going to do that. Let's grab our distress inks. I'm going to be using picked raspberry and dried marigold and squeezed lemonade. Now the amount of pressure you use to create a background is really important, so I'm going to show you on my hand here what I'm talking about. When I talk about a light touch, you're barely touching your skin. And what I want you to think of is maybe if you had a sunburn and it hurts to touch your skin, that's how lightly you're going to press, just barely touching. Next is deep pressure, and this is how hard I'm going to be rubbing when I cover my background when I say deep pressure. So I'm going to get started here and start with my pink. For this top portion, I want you to apply really deep pressure all the way across. Okay, now that that's done, we're going to go back in and do that really faint light pressure. Okay, so just a little bit of ink and just barely rubbing. On camera, you might not even be able to see that I'm doing anything, but what it's doing is adding a very faint color, so when we take the next color, it will blend in seamlessly. All right, so just keep rubbing that in until you're happy. Okay, now let's go into our dried marigold. And this is how we're going to go in and press really deep here. So that's going to pick up that tiny bit of pink and it's going to blend it in. And it's okay at this point if you still see a stark line. Remember, this is a process and we're going to go through the whole process together, and you'll see at the end how it all comes together. So don't panic if it feels like you've got these streaks going across your paper. I'm going to pull out my Simon Says Stamp Fog ink because what I want to do is take my background builder sun, and I want to add a sun element into this card, and I need a little guideline so I know exactly where to put it and what shape I want. You can skip this if you want, but I really wanted to have a guide for this, so I'm just going to place it coming over the hill, and then I'm going to take that squeezed lemonade and I'm literally using the deep pressure and I'm turning it into the paper. I'm really saturating it. Instead of going back for ink, I'm just going to use what's on there and lightly move around what's left to just make it kind of a light yellow coming from the edges here, because we want our sun to still stand out. I'm just going to keep repeating the same process a couple times till I get the color where I want it. I'm going to twist it into the sun, add the little bit of yellow on the sides, and blend it all together. You'll see me go back several times to make the sun pop, but at this point I've got it where I want it, and now we need to kind of blend it together. So we're going to create like an arc shape, and what we're going to do is take the dried marigold and just bring it down on the sides just a little bit. We're going to be using in between a light and deep pressure, and this is really all about what you like at this point. You know, how much you want the sunset to come down, how much you want the oranges and yellows to be blended together. Just experiment and see what you like. Again, I'm really fixated on making the sun pop, so I'll go back to it several times during the video. So I'm going to add more of the dried marigold along the side till I'm happy with it, and now I'm going to bring the pink down. At this point, don't get a lot of pink on your dauber. You want to have just a little bit so you can control how much pink you're bringing down. And then I'm going to go back with my marigold and blend that out. Always remember, you're adding the ink and you're blending it out with the color that comes below it. So now you can see I have an arch. My sun looks like it's glowing, but still fixated. I gotta highlight the sun again. All right, let's forget the sun. Let's go to the really fun part. Let's make the clouds, okay? So we're going to use this top portion first. We're going to be dabbing it in, and I'll show you a difference between rubbing it in and dabbing it, okay? So I'm going to be using pigment ink. It works best for this technique. And here I am going to just dab it in just lightly. And remember, depending on how dark you want these clouds, you may do this several times. So here I'm going to rub it in a swirling motion so you can see the difference. You see how one is heavier and one is more transparent? Don't worry about that. Just wipe that off. If you make a mistake, you can wipe it off at this point. But so depending on what you want, rub it in if you want really transparent, dab it in if you want something heavier. I want something that's really going to pop, so I'm going to dab my ink in and make it really solid. You can mask this off if you want. I never mask. I'm okay with making mistakes. Those are just embellishment opportunities. So I'm going to go ahead and dab in the rest of my clouds. And here they are finished, and you can see how much they pop. And I'm going to step away and let it dry for a second and come back. Now for the second layer, you don't have to do this at this point, but I really want them to be more solid so I can layer more color on. So again, I'm going to dab in that white and get them exactly where I want them before I start adding the other colors and layers. I think creating these backgrounds are probably one of my most favorite things to do in card making. It's just so satisfying to see it completely come together. Now, I know it looks like I'm swirling, but I really am dabbing, I promise you. It just doesn't look like it on camera. For this bottom cloud that I'm about to come to, there's the sun. I want to kind of make the cloud darker behind it and keep that tiny bit of yellow so it looks like it's almost kind of shining onto the sun. You can skip that if you want to. I just think it's kind of a fun little look and technique. So I'm going to add a bit more white to the top of my clouds because I want to add a tad bit more color. You can do these clouds as little or as much as you want, like I said, or maybe you could do them in grays or blues and make a foggy sky. So, I mean, the possibilities are endless. Since I'm a lover of foggy, gray, cloudy skies, I would definitely like to see a background like that. I think that would be fun. All right, another schmooze. Got to wipe it off. I do schmoozing all the time. So let's going to go ahead and add details. So I want some of that yellow coming up and the pink coming down on the clouds. So I'm just going to take my inks. Oh, roll away, dabber. I'm just going to take my pink, add a tiny bit, just a little bit, not a lot. I'm going to use the very edge of it. And I'm just going to put on a little bit of color on the top of the clouds. This does add a very faint, very light bit of color. So you really don't have to do this, but I think it's kind of fun to kind of change the color and texture of the clouds. So you're just going to kind of slightly rub it on with a really light hand, like we talked about, that whole kind of sunburn touch. You want it to be really, really faint. And I'm only going to do these top three because they're in the pink. The bottom ones, it would really pop too much because they're down with the oranges and golds. And now that I've done that, I'm just going to take the white and I'm just going to kind of dab a little bit over it to make it a little bit faint. Because we don't want this to be in your face. We want it to be very subtle, just like that. All right, let's get ready for my favorite part, the little layering element that I love so much. So this is the bottom portion. It lines up with your clouds that we just created. So we're going to put it right up there and just create a very subtle shadow effect. Remember, less is more, because when you stand back and see it all together and you see the big picture, it all comes together and looks really pretty and subtle. So I'm just going to tap in that dried marigold. You can do it as heavy or as light as you want to. And then just dab, 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 pull it up, and there you have these great little shadow lines. See how it adds just a little bit more texture to your clouds? It's so much fun. It's addicting. You guys have to try it. Okay, our scene is complete. Our sunset looks gorgeous. Now let's get on those hills. We're going to pull away the masks and get out our hill stencil. And I'm just going to use these to kind of tape down the top because I like to press really hard when I blend these oxide inks together. So the first one we're going to start with is our solid base. Okay, the texture part's going to come later. So I'm just going to line that up with where my stencil was. And my oxide inks I'm going to be using today are Twisted Citron and Lucky Clover. A wee bit of Lucky Clover we're going to be using. Sorry, I love to do voices. Okay, anyway, back to our hill. I'm going to start with the Twisted Citron, and I'm just going to rub that in, and remember that's our solid base. We're going to be adding to that. So just go ahead and fill that in as light or as dark as you want to. This is all preference at this point. We're going to switch to Lucky Clover. I'm going to resist doing the leprechaun voice. Very difficult, but I'm going to try. I'm going to blend it into the bottom just to add some shadow to it. And then I'm going to take my citron again, and I'm just going to go over and blend it out. That way it's kind of seamlessly blended. Now we're going to add that detail in just a minute, but first I'm going to go and do my other hill. And I'm going to start again with the Twisted Citron. Now when it comes to layering these hills, you know, you want one to kind of look like one's in front of the other. So this first one, I'm going to add a bit more of the Lucky Clover to it so I can get that kind of depth. And remember, our chubby unicorn is going to be sitting on it, so we want that one to stand out a bit more. This, again, is all preference at this point. I mean, you can have these solid green, you can blend different colors, 3 or 4 colors together, whatever you like, but what I like to do always is go back and blend over those two, because then they look seamless together. And now it's time for texture, the best part. All those little blades of grass are so much fun. So now I'm going to take this, lay it over just slightly above the hill. And the reason why is because we want the texture to look like it's coming from the hill. So keep adding that along, just add the Twisted Citron. And once you're done having the blades added to both hills, then we're going to go in and add a bit more detail. Because so you can see it, you can stop here, it's very light. This all depends on how you want it. But now I'm going to go up a little bit higher and take the Lucky Clover, add that to it, and just in random spots, not all over, because I want it to look like a natural hill. Okay, I'm going to move it down, sideways, around, and you can see how it adds just a little bit more visual interest. And if you want, you can add even more detail by taking our Grassy Hill background building stamp. I'm going to stamp that in the Lucky Clover, and then I'm just going to add that to the hill. Now, you can have that really dark or really light, and the way you're going to achieve a bit lighter is you're going to stamp it off paper, and then stamp again, and that will give you a lighter version of it. I'm going to add a few more blades of grass here because I think that would add some more fun texture and interest to it. I'm going to stamp that in my Lucky Clover and then just kind of randomly put it all over. Now if you stamp this and you decide you don't like it, get your stencil back out, put it on top, and grab your citron, your Lucky Clover, and blend right over it. It'll lighten it up, and then you'll be left with the image that you'll be happier with. So our scene is complete now. Look at how gorgeous that is. All those elements come together to make the perfect background, making it easy, simple, and fun for you. Now I've just taken mine, cut it up into pieces, and pop dotted it to make a more three-dimensional scene. You could do that, or you could leave it in one piece. With our background building products, you could create whatever kind of background you desire, and I can't wait to see what you make. Thanks so much for joining me. Please be sure to subscribe to our channel so you can get the latest technique videos, and join us on our social media sites. We'd love to see you there.